Welcome back to Wednesday Night Fightback. Now, Michael, you are a China expert on economics, and you're a good person to ask, is China in a debt crisis? You read a lot, and it bubbles up occasionally, local authority debt issues and major property companies having solvency issues. How serious is this? And to what extent will it affect China's ability to grow at a reasonable pace and act as a motor for global growth?
Right. There are two answers to that. And as I say, I've been looking at China for much longer than I care to think of, really since about 1988. So I've seen them through several cycles and several debt cycles. And look, the answer is twofold. Will this overhang of property debt mean that they're in for an extended period of lower growth? And the answer is yes. Traditionally, the answer to slower growth has always been a credit expansion, but as you get more credit expansion, so it becomes less efficient at generating growth. And if you look at the economy generally, it used to be back in the 1990s that if China added 100 renminbi of credit, they get about 120 renminbi out of it in terms of nominal GDP growth. If they add 100 renminbi now, they get about 13 fen. So their ability to simply expand the economy by expanding credit becomes more and more difficult. Is that a long-term hobble on their economic growth? The answer is very clearly yes. Very clearly yes. And I'm wary of the catastrophist point of view that says, and therefore the Chinese economy collapses. China's economy doesn't collapse because of bad debt until or unless the depositors start fleeing the banking system. Now, they've done this before. They did it in the 1980s, just before, in 1987, 88. They fled the banking system and just bought loads and loads of white goods to protect themselves. They did it again in the early 1990s when they had a very similar situation and depositors just started fleeing out of the banking system. When you do that, then you've got a crisis. If you don't have that, you've got a problem. And at the moment, I think they've got a problem. But if I look at the stability of the deposits in the banking system, it's still a problem, not a crisis. Now, it may get to be a crisis, but I don't think it's a given thing. I really don't.
Okay. Well, let's just dig into some of the detail on this. So it's a problem in that the very large property companies like Evergrande are basically insolvent, aren't they?
Yeah. Yes, they are.
So so Michael, what's going to actually happen? They've got a lot of stock that's empty. They've got a lot of stock that isn't built because they take deposits prior to it being built. Yeah. What a mess. So how's this mess going to be cleared up?
Well, it isn't going to be cleared up. It's going to fester for decades. I mean, that's actually, there was one other thing which, the one other possibility, and here I've got to be a little bit careful of what I say. But this is also obviously a massive political problem. And I think that there's more danger in the political problem than there is in the economic or even financial problem. Xi Jinping has given himself really very extensive powers, powers unseen since Mao. And he evidently believes that he's going to hold these powers until he dies peacefully in his bed at great old age. Well, I think that's rather difficult to be compatible with this sort of problem just hanging on and destroying or moderating sharply the expected future growth for decades. So that's where I think you're likely to get your shock, is more likely to be political than financial, actually. And as I say, I'm sorry about that, Xi Jinping. Love China, love you all. Don't cut me off, but it's a political problem. It's a political problem.
Yeah, but I'm sort of trying to look at the causal chain here. So you have a very large propco, very large propcos that are in trouble, and I can't see how that doesn't end up in a banking crisis, because the balance sheets, the loan books of the banks are going to be underwater. And I always, to use a metaphor, who's going to clear up the blood? Who's going to mop this up? How is it going to be mopped up?
It's going to be mopped up by depositors by savers being forced into the deposit market, and then really poor banking spread. So you get nothing on your deposits and you pay loads for loans. I mean, that's if you trade your way out of it,
that's what's happening here.
Yeah, you roll as much as you can, and then you do financial repression. That's what's going to be the plan. Actually, there is another factor which is again political and probably more important, and that's what happens to local government strands. Provincial governments and city governments. So you've got various levels of governance within China. At the central level, everything looks okay, dealable with. As you go down, the responsibilities flow down, but the revenues flow up. And the way in which local governments have managed to keep their local services and local plans going has been through property sales. And the problem, actually is going to be there. It's going to be at local government level. How do they get the money? It's not, forget the banking problem. They'll deal with the banking problem. How are they going to deal with the fundamental problem in China? And China's fundamental problem is this, and it's not something which people talk about. Its real fundamental problem is it doesn't tax its economy. If you look at its total tax revenues to GDP, it's now under 20%. They've never found a way to tax this economy, and the result is they've filled in all that in with selling property and financing local government by selling property. If they can't do that, that's going to be the problem. That's going to be the problem.
Yeah. No, I've read about that. The FT had an excellent series a few years ago on how precarious local government was and how it was financed and it was relied on the property model. So it's very interesting. But it is concerning, and we should all be concerned about it, because youth unemployment, I gather, is quite high now in China. Slowing growth is not going to be a good outlook for that. And,
who knows? Who knows? I mean, you have to remember that China is such a big place. Saying things like youth unemployment is really high. Well, is it? I mean, I don't know whether it is. I don't even think China knows how many people it's got. I mean, we say we've got this great demographic crisis. Are you sure? Have you counted them all? I agree.
You did some work, didn't you, about a year and a half ago on how many labour supply in the UK on two sets of data, and different. Actually, and anyone paying attention to Spanish youth unemployment figures, which show 20-30%, it can't be that. And many businesses.
The entire Italian economy is clearly not as stated.
Yes, it's considerably larger.
Yes,
and Italian households are considerably wealthier than German, so it's fascinating. Well, listen, we'll look. It's an important issue, and it will affect the whole world. So I think it's important to be aware of it at least, and watch it and see what happens, and hope for the best.
Hope for the best. Okay, good.
Take care, Michael. Thanks.
Bye.